This is the Read, Write, and Create podcast, the award-winning podcast where you get a bite-sized session of creative writing coaching from me, Lori L. Tharps. I'm a journalist and a former tenured college professor who moved to the south of Spain so I could live a global literary life. I'm also an award-winning author of both fiction and nonfiction who believes in the transformative power of a story well told. I created this podcast because I want to help as many BIPOC writers as possible get their stories out of their heads and into the world. Are you ready? Let's go. Hello, wordsmiths, storytellers, and scribes. I am back with another new episode for our special Behind the Book season of the podcast. Remember, in this season, instead of speaking with legendary authors, we will be speaking to people who work in the book business, people whose livelihoods depend on the free-flowing circulation of books in the world, people who believe with the very marrow of their bones that books are both sacred and necessary. People like today's guest, Sylvia Arthur. Sylvia Arthur is the founder of the Library of Africa and the African Diaspora, also known as LOATAD. The Library of Africa and the African Diaspora is a library, an archive, a writing residency, and research institute in Accra, Ghana, dedicated to the work of African and diaspora writers from the late 19th century to the present day. Sylvia started LOATAD using 1,300 of her own books in 2017, and she has since curated 6 libraries in Ghana, including school, community, and corporate libraries. She is an advocate for the restitution of African literary archives to the continent and has delivered various talks and presentations on the subject. She is a 2024 Ford Global Fellow, a 2023 Brittle Paper Literary Person of the Year, and a 2022 National Geographic Explorer, working to document the stories of West African women aged 60 plus through the creation of an expansive oral archive. Sylvia is a 2-time TEDx speaker, an Africa No Filter narrative champion, and a Creative Activism Award recipient. Now, I had the good fortune of actually meeting Sylvia Arthur during my time as a resident at LOATAD, and I knew I wanted to have her on the podcast to share her amazing story. And then, once we decided to do this special Behind the Book season, I was even more convinced I wanted Sylvia on so she could tell us what it was like launching a whole entire library in Ghana when she herself had only recently moved to the country from England, where she had lived for her whole life. Although I could easily talk to Sylvia for hours about all of her exciting projects, during this episode, we focused solely on the library, how she started it, why she started it, and all of the unique challenges she faces maintaining a private library in Ghana. Most importantly, Sylvia shares why, despite all the challenges, she continues to believe in the power of books and stories. So, let's go behind the book with Sylvia Arthur. Welcome to the Read, Write, and Create podcast, Sylvia Arthur.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm happy to be here.
Well, I'm very happy you're here for this very special season of the podcast where we are going behind the book. So, my first question, going to every guest that comes on this season, do you think books are powerful? And if so, why?
I mean, I think obviously books are powerful. That's why they're being banned, because we all know the potential that they have to change people, to inspire people, to stir people. And from my own experience, books have empowered me. I mean, when I was growing up, I grew up in the UK, in London. I was born and raised in London. And at that time, there weren't that many books, especially by Black authors, that were easily accessible. If I look at the books I studied on my school curricula, for example, there were definitely no books by any Black writers. And so these were things that you had to seek out for yourself. And when I first read, and I can't even remember who it was, maybe it was an Alice Walker or even a Martin Luther King, it really did change my outlook on things. And enabled and allowed me to see that Black people are intellectual beings, because up until that point, everything around you is telling you that we are manual labor people, let's say. That's what we are built for. And so discovering books, especially by Black authors, really did change my life. It changed my thinking. It changed my outlook. It changed what I believed was possible. And that's where the power in books lies, I believe.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And the experience was obviously very similar growing up as a Black female, a Black person in the United States as well. So that leads me to my next question. Obviously, you believe you've experienced the power of books. So does that explain why you decided to open a library in 2017? What provoked you to start a library, first of all? And second, why in Accra, Ghana?
Libraries I've used my whole life. My earliest memories are probably from the age of 3, and libraries have always been a part of whatever memories that I have. I also think that the power of having a space where all the books are free, all the books are accessible, there's no kind of restriction on what you can discover. I just think it's such a powerful concept. And obviously in this day and age where everything is priced, everything has a cost, and that cost is sometimes, and probably more often than not, designed to exclude people. I find obviously libraries are very inclusive spaces. So I've been in love with libraries my whole life. I believe that my bedroom when I was growing up was a kind of library because I was surrounded by books. I'm lucky enough to come from a family that, reading and my love of books was always encouraged. And I would say not only books as well, newspapers, magazines, vinyl, records, just everything in terms of the arts was very supported and encouraged. So my first library was my bedroom, I would say. And I travel a lot, and I have traveled a lot for my work over the last few years. And whenever I go to a new country, the first thing that I look for is a bookstore. And so every time I would go to Ghana, I would go to the few bookstores that there were at that time, because we're talking about probably the late 90s, early 2000s. And there just were never any books that I found appealing, let's say, in those bookstores, or, the people who were on the street selling books. They tended to sell books that were like the 4-Hour Work Week, those kind of self-help books. And I wanted to know about my country and my people. And even books by Ama'ata Edu, the Ghanaian writer, or Aikwe Amar, another Ghanaian writer, were very difficult to come by in Ghana. So I kind of got the idea for the library in 2011. I was living and working in Brussels at the time, and it was the first time that I had lived and worked in another country outside of the UK. And so I didn't really know anybody there. And as a reader, what I did was I kind of consoled myself with books. So I would buy lots and lots and lots of books, and they became too many to accommodate in my apartment in Brussels, too many to accommodate in my apartment in London. My mum has a house in Kumasi in Ghana. And so I shipped them to her house because there was a space there. And every time I would go back to the house and I would just see all the books there, I thought, it's such a waste that they're not being read and then not being accessed by people who could, I would have hoped, benefit from them, because they were culturally relevant books in terms of, they were books by writers of African descent predominantly. And these were the kind of books that I was not seeing in the bookstores and with the people who were selling them on the street. And so it was then that I had the idea for the library, but it wasn't until 2017 that I actually opened it, which is when I moved to Ghana. And so that's how the idea for the library came about. It was really about wanting people to be able to have this, I've heard books described as portable magic. There is actually a book called Portable Magic about books. And I wanted people to be able to have that and to experience that and to have books that reflected them, both in terms of the writer, but in terms of the content contained within those books.
Portable magic. I'm going to use that. Yeah. So that's your story again. It's so familiar. I too, one of my earliest memories was the library. I called it my babysitter. My mom also called it my babysitter because it was like, just go spend the day at the library. And again, it was books, but it was also, I remember there were videotapes we could watch and,
CDs,
music,
yeah.
CD,
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah.
The idea of a library being a accessible and magical place and obviously very necessary, I'm with you 100%. But the part where I lose you, and I'm sure many of our listeners, is how do you do this though? Like, did you have any experience launching a library? Do you have any experience in library science? What made you think I can open a library in a country that, yes, is your country of heritage, but this is not where you have all your contacts and work experience? So tell us a little bit about not only how you went about it, but what gave you the confidence to take this on?
That's an interesting question. I just did it, in the words of Nike, I guess I just did it. I maybe wasn't thinking about the obstacles as such, and I was thinking about the potential. And I think that's how I just was able to do it. I definitely do not have a background in library sciences or information management or anything like that. I just had a whole load of books, and I've been to so many libraries, and I thought, okay, well, maybe I could do this as well. So maybe it was a bit of arrogance. I don't know. But yeah, I also believe that if you want to do something, you shouldn't wait for other people to give you permission to do it. You should just do it. I think that's the attitude that I used. So it's definitely a lot of learning along the way, which I probably could have avoided if, I had not so much been intentional about it, because I was definitely intentional, but maybe more intentional, let's say. I mean, I think that's quite a difficult question to answer, but maybe a lot of it is to do with personality as well as, just going for it.
So in terms of the actual practicality of it, like what kind of space did you use? And did you have a vision for what you wanted the library to look like and where it was going to be located in Accra? Did you end up getting what you wanted, or was it this is what it has to be for now? Just tell us a little bit about setting the library up. What did that entail for you personally?
So the idea was originally that it would be based in Cape Coast in the central region of Ghana. It was never supposed to be in Accra, but actually my mum was kind of based partly in Accra at that time. And so it just made practical sense to be there. But yeah, as I said, it was supposed to be in Cape Coast. The idea being that, Cape Coast is such a historic place. It has such meaning for people of African descent, and not just Ghanaian people, but also people from all across Africa and the diaspora. It is where, quote unquote, the slave castles are. It's where our people were sent to and housed, quote unquote, before they were shipped across the Atlantic, and many never to return. And so because of the kind of historical and cultural significance of that, I thought that this would be the ideal place for this type of library, where the focus is on writers of African descent. And I looked for a place in Cape Coast. I looked at various buildings and houses and offices, but unfortunately, I just wasn't able to find the right space. And there were many spaces, very, kind of appropriate spaces, because they have these type of old colonial type buildings that have many rooms. And, I just thought that it would have been perfect. But unfortunately, there's a lot of litigation, let's just say, around certain properties, especially in that area, which has now actually become quite gentrified. So it just didn't work out in Cape Coast. And then it just so happened that one day my mum was going to the pharmacy near where we live in Accra. And the pharmacy was on the bottom floor of a 2-story building. And I looked up and I just saw this empty space, this empty office, and it had a big window. And I thought, oh, that looks like it would be perfect for this library. And so I went to meet with the owner of the building because I asked about it, and it was relatively affordable. It was near to where I lived. It was a wide open space, so it had lots of wall space for shelving. And I just thought, okay, this could work. It was a small 1-room office. And yeah, I think I signed the contract probably within a day of seeing it, or 2 days of seeing it. And then I arranged for the books to be brought down from my mum's house in Kumasi, which is about a 4-hour drive from Accra. And that was an experience in itself. I wasn't bringing the books, but my friend who was bringing the books broke down en route. So it took like 2 days for the books to get there. And then once they did get there 2 days later, on what should be a 4-hour trip, it was a case of sorting through the books, cataloguing the books, arranging the books, and then setting up the space, which I always knew I wanted to have pictures of the writers on the wall. But actually, it was my mum's idea. It was my mum who suggested that, because I was going to go for a very minimalist kind of space, just a white room with these shelves and these books. And she said, no, you should put the pictures of the writers on the wall. And I thought, actually, that's a really good idea, because oftentimes we know the names of writers, but we don't know what they look like. And it was very, I think, a powerful aesthetic to walk into a space and not only be surrounded by books by African and African descended writers, but to also see their faces there and to see that, you know, these are our people and this is what we do. And that's how it came about.
I just, want to put a pin in this idea of everything you're doing. Somebody could have said, oh, I'm going to start a bookstore and made it about commerce. But you wanted this. I mean, the whole point was to make it accessible, and not just accessible, but beautiful. And with this mission of showing that same feeling you had when you first saw books by Black people, what a transformative experience it was. And that therefore should be accessible to all, not just those who can pay for it. So I really applaud that.
Yeah, I mean, I should say that in the beginning, we were a lending library, and we did used to charge people to be a member of the library so that they could borrow the books. That was really a practical thing, which quickly backfired, actually, I should say, because, you know, some people would take the books and obviously never bring them back. And it was actually more cost effective for them to become a member of the library and come and borrow, quote unquote, the books and never bring them back. And, you know, the classic example that I always give of this is when Michelle Obama's Becoming came out. It was a very in demand, obviously popular book. And I think it was selling for about 250 cities. And 250 cities was maybe at that time £25 or maybe $28 or $30, something like that. Anyway, you know, it used to be 50 cities to be a member of the library, and you could borrow 3 books. So if you consider that 50 cities is the equivalent of maybe, I don't know, I think back then it was maybe $4 or so. You know, it was better off for you if you wanted to get a Michelle Obama book and 2 others to pay the $4 to be a member of the library and walk out with $50 worth of books and never come back. So, you know, in the beginning, yes, we did used to charge, which I guess it does make it kind of less accessible for some people. But we had to do that in order to be able to try to sustain ourselves. But obviously that didn't work out. So that's one of the expensive lessons I guess I learned.
That was one of the next questions, was kind of like weave this into where the library is today, which it's not in that same space. I know that you've grown and grown and grown. So can you talk about where you are today in 2025 with the library, including the idea of how does one sustain? Now you even have a bigger collection and you're not a lending library. So could you talk about, again, where are you today and how does the financial piece work for sustaining such an incredible institution now?
So we've actually moved 2 times since we started in 2017. As I said, we started in that 1-room office, and then we moved in 2020 to a 5-bedroom house. The idea behind moving to the bigger space was not only that we had quickly outgrown the previous space, because as well as being a library, we also do a ton of events, film screenings, lots of readings, lots of author events, you know, all kinds of things. And so when we moved in 2020, it was a natural progression because I had always wanted to have a writing residency from the very beginning. And the idea was to incorporate the writing residency into the library, which is why we moved into this 5-bedroom house. But it was also very unfortunate timing because of COVID in 2020. And in Ghana, what you do is you pay your rent up front 2 years in advance. And, you know, this was a house in a very residential and well-to-do neighborhood in Accra. And so you pay in US dollars as well. And so we had just paid 2 years rent in advance for this place. And then COVID hit. And that was, you know, it was such a difficult time for us. At the same time, it was the murder of George Floyd in that same year in 2020. There was all of a sudden a lot of attention on the library. Specifically, there was a lot of attention on Ghana because what the media were doing were looking at kind of alternatives for people in the Black diaspora and the African diaspora, alternative ways of life, alternative options if you don't want to live in countries that are killing you effectively. And so all of a sudden, there was a lot of interest in the library. There was BBC, France 24, Al Jazeera, CNN. We did all these interviews. And that then focused a lot of attention on us. And, all of a sudden, we started getting really small donations that made a difference to us, particularly from America and from African Americans, I should say. There was one man in particular who every fortnight would send us $75. And it's not even that he was ever going to visit the library, maybe. He may never even come to Ghana, but because he supported the kind of idea behind it, the philosophy behind it. There were many people like him. There were others who would send us books from the United States as well. So it just became a movement, as I like to call it. It became more than a library, and it became a movement, and it became more than just Ghana. It became what the name of it signifies. It became African and Diaspora as well in that moment in 2020. And so after that, we moved again in 2022 to the space that we're currently in, which is another 5-bedroom house, but much bigger. It has 5 bedrooms inside and then also a 2-bedroom outhouse. And this has really enabled us to be able to do the residency as kind of our main function now. I think our main function now is writing residencies for writers from across Africa and the diaspora who come and they stay with us for a period of 1 month and they're working on whatever book project they're working on. And in terms of sustainability, that is the only part of the library that is funded by anyone that's not me. Because up until that point, I had been paying for everything through my work. I had a day job, and it was that money that was paying for the running of the library. And then it was in 2021 that we actually got our first funding. And so it's through the residency program, which tends to be funded by organizations such as Hawthornden, that we are able to continue to exist in the way that we do.
So funding, I'm assuming, is a consistent challenge for you to keep the library running. What are some of the other challenges that, again, running a library sounds so peaceful and fun and like bookish and lovely. Probably people have no idea what the challenges are. Particularly, I know because for those who might be new listening, I actually did spend a month as a resident at the library. It was amazing. But I know we spoke briefly about just maintaining books in the climate in Accra, which is a high heat climate. So talk a little bit about just what some of the challenges are in maintaining the library.
I mean, that's a really good point. So thank you for bringing it up. I mean, obviously, the maintenance of the books is key if you want to run a library well and sustainably. And the climate is a big challenge. But also even just the physical handling of the books. And that was something that I struggled with a lot in the beginning, is how people handle books, which sounds, very nerdy. But at the same time, when they're passing through many hands, you need to be able to keep them and maintain them well. And it's actually very costly to be able to cover books, with the plastic covering that protects them and gives them longevity. So we don't actually have a lot of that. But one thing that I have always been conscious of getting is hardback books, which are not easy to get in Ghana, by the way, because of the market in terms of buying and selling books. Paperbacks rule, and hardbacks are not that easy to come by. But because most of the books are acquired from the UK and from the United States and from Europe, I'm able to get hardback. So that's one of the major challenges. The other is, we also have a lot of archival material. So we have various ephemera, like letters from writers and photographs, and we have rare and out of print books that just have aged, for example. And all these are the kind of challenges that maybe people don't consider when they think about a library. And obviously you have the added difficulty, as you said, of the climate as well, which is always a challenge.
One of the things that when I first arrived, we were given a tour by Seth, the manager, who's amazing. Shout out. Hey, Seth. And he described the library as a shrine to our literary ancestors. I wonder if you might kind of, in considering that idea, how do you want people to, you said that it's mostly the residency now, but how do you want the average person to interact with or experience the library today? What is the way that somebody who's listening, who's planning a trip to Accra, how might they experience the library? What is your vision in that sense?
We do welcome people to come and visit the library, to come and use the resources. Everybody is welcome. We're run by an appointment system, so you could book it online via our website. We also do guided tours of the space, which for me are the best thing, actually. I used to love doing those tours because you really do see people, and, you know, it may sound grandiose in a sense, but I've literally seen people enter the space one way and leave it another, because just to be surrounded by and immersed in our literary and intellectual heritage, I think it's a powerful thing. And not just that, but to be able to learn in depth about, you know, who we are in a sense and what we do, but more than that, the connection between us all, especially I think in this world of disconnection, which seems antithetical to the idea of the internet and, you know, everybody being connected on social media. I think efforts to disconnect us as a people over centuries have done significant work in that sense and damage. And so to be able to come into the space and be told, well, actually, these are writers from the Americas and this is what they wrote about. And these are writers from Africa and this is what they wrote about. But actually, they were connected. Alice Walker, for example, was connected to Bessie Head. And Sonia Sanchez was connected to Bessie Head, and Aikwe Ma knew this person. And, you know, all these kind of connections that are both physical and spiritual. I think you find them all in the library, but that is brought out by the tour. And that is why I think that is one of the most important things that we actually do. And it's not only, actually, I would say it's mainly not bookish people who come to the library and come for the tour. It's curious people, and maybe they've heard about it and they want to know what it's about. And, you know, they come in there maybe not knowing anything about African and diaspora literature and writers, but they certainly leave wanting to know more and feeling like they have gained something from the experience. And to me, that is the best thing.
It is. And again, from experience, to me, it felt like a holy experience. And I was there to write, but I just wanted to read everything. You know, you read a book by an African American author and then a Caribbean author and then an African author, like maybe from Ghana or from Nigeria, and you see the connections and just being in the space, like you said, with the photographs and understanding the connections from the literary movements that went across the diaspora that were also one inspiring the other. It is the reconnection that so many diasporans have lost or has been ripped away from us, better said. It is a really powerful experience. So as we wrap up here, I'm wondering, because it isn't an easy job, I know that, you know, there's a lot of personal sacrifice for you to keep this library running. What keeps you motivated, Sylvia, to keep doing this work? What's your personal motivation to keep going?
You know, I mean, I've wanted to quit many times. You know, it tends to happen every 2 years, which is when the lease for, you know, the various buildings are up. So, you know, just before the lease for the first building was up, I wanted to quit then. Then the second building, I wanted to quit then. And, you know, various other times in this period, I've wanted to quit. But I would say what keeps me going is just what we discussed. It's seeing people come in one way, whether that is a casual visitor to the library, somebody who's on a tour, a resident or an academic, and seeing the impact that it has on them and seeing the power that it has on them. And so that's what keeps me going. That's what motivates me. It's about seeing, you know, somebody who has never left their country before. And even if that country is just next door, you know, even if that country is Togo or Nigeria or wherever, they've never left. And they're leaving their country for the first time and flying on a plane because of the library, because they're coming to do a residency there. You know, being in Ghana for the first time, or maybe even the fifth time, but, you know, you're coming to the library and it's like an incubator and it's changed you. All that keeps me going. Every time I hear from a resident, as you wrote your piece, you know, about the library, that motivates me. And yes, it's not easy, but I guess as long as the people are there and the people are, you know, writers are there and they're wanting to come, we will persevere as much as we can for as long as we can. So let's see.
Well, let's see, actually, how many people listen to this episode, Sylvia, and say, my God, I want to make sure this library lives on forever. So if somebody's listening right now, and I have a global audience, it's not a large audience, but still, you never know who's listening. What would you want people to do to support the library? Like, what's the best thing people could do? And list, more than one thing so, people can do what they can.
Obviously, you could donate financially to the library. We have a coffee page that you can donate via. It's ko-fi.com/LOATAD, LOATAD.
We'll put the links in the show notes, of course.
Thank you. You could also donate books to us. So we are a library that is dedicated to the collection, preservation, and dissemination of books by writers of African descent. And so when we say African descent, we obviously mean from the African continent, from the Americas, from the Caribbean, from Europe. So if you have any books that you are wanting to donate by writers of African descent, please do. That is always a good thing. Also, to share the library, let your people know about us. So if anybody is visiting Accra or would like to do a residency or, would like to engage with us on social media, please share the kind of social media and the links to the library as well. That's also helpful. Yeah, just spread the word. I find that spreading the word and word of mouth is the most effective form of communication. It's one thing for me to sit here and say, oh, the library's fantastic, come and visit. But, if somebody else says it through actual experience, that's even better. So, yeah, spread the word.
And just out of curiosity, people can also use the library for events, correct? So like if they wanted to host a book club meeting or a
film screening or dinner, we have literary dinners as well. We have a quite sizable space. It's accessible. So yeah, if you're wanting to host any type of event actually at the library within reason, please also reach out to us as well.
Have you ever had a wedding in the library? Because I, for one, would get married in that library. I would just...
Actually, funny enough, maybe, let's say something may be coming up along those lines. Yeah.
Awesome. I love it. All right, Sylvia, I have one last question for you. It's not about the library, but we're asking everybody this. What was the last book that you read and loved?
Okay, I don't know if I loved it, but I did like it. And that's Ta-Nehisi Coates' The Message, which I loved it in parts. I think it's a very important book. It says a lot. I wish it said more in some places, but I do think it's a small but powerful book. I do think people should read it, and people have read it. Obviously, parts of it have caught more of the public attention than other parts of it. But I think what he says about writing and a writer's purpose, I think are really powerful. So yeah, I would definitely say Ta-Nehisi Coates' The Message is probably the last book. And I didn't actually read it, although I actually have it here on my desk right now. I listened to it as an audiobook. And it's the first time that I've done that in a long time and actually focused and listened to something and had to kind of rewind it and go back in parts. So yeah, that's the last book that I read and liked.
Does he narrate it himself?
He does. He narrates it himself. And I think that makes a difference.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then I'm actually just tacking this one last question on. If somebody's listening and they've never read any books by Ghanaian authors, what's a book that you might suggest to anybody that they might like from a Ghanaian author?
Well, I'm going to have to say my favorite, which I always say, which is Ama Ata Adu's Our Sister Killjoy. And I think that is a book that was written and published well ahead of its time. It was published in 1977. And it's written in poetry and prose, a combination of the two. It really packs a punch. The lead character, Sissy, is a Ghanaian, I guess you would say maybe civil servant or so, but she travels to Europe for the first time, and it's all about her experience of Europe through Ghanaian eyes. So the gaze is switched, in a sense. It's her looking at Europe instead of Europe looking at us, and it's very interesting. She has very interesting takes and insights, and she doesn't hold back. And so it's one of my favorite books. And so that's Ama Ata Adu's Our Sister Killjoy, which was recently republished by Faber in a new edition with a foreword by another Ghanaian writer, which is Aisha Haruna Atta.
Oh, I'm so excited. So links for all of these books will be in the show notes. Thank you so much, Sylvia. I appreciate you coming on to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So, people, are you impressed with Sylvia Arthur? Maybe you're inspired to start your own library, or hopefully more inspired to keep writing so you can add your books to a literary shrine one day. See, it's people like Sylvia Arthur who make me see my work as a writer in more elevated terms. I did take 2 of my books to LOATAD when I went, and I'm so excited to think that they are now part of this mission-driven collection of materials. Remember, you can make a donation to LOATAD so they can continue to do good work. You can send books by Black authors to them, and you can just share their good work within your own communities. And I would highly recommend that you go visit the next time you're in Ghana. I highly recommend getting that tour with Seth of the entire library so you can experience the magic that is in LOATAD. I guarantee you will never look at a book or a library the same way again. Thank you so much, Sylvia, for spending time with the Read, Write, and Create community. If you're looking for more creative writing inspiration and useful resources for your literary life, then be sure to check out the Read, Write, and Create website at readwriteandcreate.com. And if you haven't checked it out yet, I don't know what you're waiting for. We have an excellent blog, we have resources, so much to help you move along in your literary life. Speaking of which, if you want even more help to move along in your literary life, you should sign up to get the Read, Write, and Create monthly newsletter. It comes into your inbox once a month, and it's where you will find out about my latest classes and creative offerings, as well as cool things to optimize and enjoy your literary lifestyle. I will leave the link for both the website and the newsletter in the show notes. And again, I literally exist to make your life more fulfilling, satisfying, and joyful as a writer. So I can again suggest that you follow the Read, Write, and Create account on Instagram. We are always posting lots of little tidbits of inspiration and useful links to upcoming opportunities, contests, and prizes for BIPOC writers. So follow us. It's really just a click. And we are at Read, Write, and Create on Instagram. That's Read, R-E-E-D, Write, and Create. And that's C-R-E, the number 8. And please understand, I do not make these funny versions of spelling just to make your life difficult. You know, other people use my name before I got a chance to, so I got to play with it. So sorry about all the different spellings, but again, it's worth it. Read, Write, and Create, C-R-E, and the number 8. Okay, and one more thing while you're following things. Have you thought about following me on YouTube? I have a new YouTube channel at Literary Lori, and it's on YouTube that I share more about my global literary life. So yeah, every time I do my travel and tourism and go to new bookstores and literary festivals around Europe, around Africa, that's where I talk about it and show the world what I'm doing and try to show off just how colorful the literary world can be beyond the regular favorites, you know, in England and in France, where things tend to be a little melanin challenged. I just recently actually posted a new video on my channel about the Library of Africa and the African Diaspora, so you can hear more about it and you can see the inside of it from my videos. All right. Now, you guys know I'm going to end here, but I am going to remind you that if you want to make a small monetary donation to keep this podcast running, you can do so via the link in the show notes where it says buy me a coffee. Again, I don't really drink coffee. I'm more of a tea girl. I think it goes with the whole writing vibe. I like my tea. But again, it's just a symbolic donation. No, I mean, it's real money. It's real money. But, you know, you're not actually going to pay for the whole podcast, but every little bit counts. And maybe if everybody who listened bought me a coffee, maybe 2 coffees, I could actually pay for the editor for the podcast because he's really good and he deserves it too. So anyway, I appreciate everything you guys do. I appreciate these are difficult times. And if you can't donate, it's okay. I appreciate you anyway. And I will be here next week, Monday, as always, with a new episode for you. The Read, Write, and Create podcast is written and produced by me, Lori L. Tharps. Our editor is Brad Linder, and our theme music is by Wataboy. Until next week, writers, keep writing. The world needs more BIPOC stories by BIPOC storytellers just like you.